Good afternoon and welcome to the March 22nd, 2021 Park Advisory Committee of the East Bay Regional Park District. Chair Rickard, would you like me to take roll?
Yes, I would like to call the roll, but since we have one new member of the PAC and a new general manager, I would like to have folks, when you call their name, give their name, where they live, and who their appointing authority is. Also, we'll ask Marie Arce, who is our new member, to give us a little more background of how she arrived on the PAC. And that way we can introduce ourselves to those new folks. So please do call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Rickard. Today we also have with us is Board Member Beverly Lane and our new General Manager, Sabrina Landreth. PAC members, Vice Chair Obringer.
I'm here.
Member Arce.
Wait, oh,
I'm sorry, I apologize. Please go ahead.
Give your name and where you live, Carlin, and who appointed you.
Oh, sure. My apologies. Carlin Obringer. I reside here in the city of Concord, serve on the Concord City Council, and as a result, I am appointed to this fine body by the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Arce.
Present. I will give you a little bit of background. My appointing authority is Colin Coffey. I'm really excited to be here. I grew up in the East Bay, frequenting the regional parks quite a bit as a kid. And it's really an interesting perspective being able to bring your kids back and enjoy it as an adult, which is two totally different experiences. I am the chair of the Antioch Parks and Recreation Commission. I ran for Antioch City Council this past year, and right now I'm on the Mayor's Transition Team for the Recreation and Youth Services. And I'm very excited to be here and see how we can, kind of bridge a lot of the efforts with Antioch Parks and Recreation and East Bay Regional Parks to better serve our beautiful East Bay community. So I appreciate you all. And I'm really excited to meet you all individually as we continue to work together in the coming months.
Thank you. Welcome.
Member Best.
Yes, Linda Best, and I live in Alamo, and I'm appointed by Director Beverly Lane.
Member Burke.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Burke. I'm appointed by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, and I live in Berkeley, and can't wait for the day where we can have meetings in actual parks and not on Zoom, especially on a day like today.
Member Carey.
Hi, my name is Andrew Carey. I was appointed by Ann Weiskamp. I live in Newark, California, and I've been a lifetime resident of the Bay Area. I'm a citizen appointee, but I've been volunteering at Ardenwood for about 30 plus years now at the Railroad Museum.
Thank you. Member Chang.
Hi, Marie. Welcome. And hi, everybody. My name is James Chang. I am a Berkeley resident, and I am appointed by Director Elizabeth Eccles. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Claxton.
Hi. Welcome. Welcome to our new member, Marie. I'm Susie Claxton from Fremont, California. I was appointed by Dennis Waspy, board director, Dennis Waspy, and I am retired from full-time work at Stanford for 31 years, and am a volunteer at the regional park. The regional park at Coyote Hills. I'm a docent there.
Thank you. Member Corkin.
Hello. I was appointed by the Labor Councils, initially by the Alameda Labor Council, but I'm in my second term, and since the position rotates, I was appointed by the Contra Costa Labor Council for this term, and I live in Oakland.
Thank you. Member DeChambeau.
Hello and welcome to this great group of land stewards. I am a retiree from the US EPA after 20 years and a nonprofit director of Contra Costa County Climate Leaders. I live and I was the mayor of Moraga, and I am appointed by Director D. Rosario.
Thank you. Member Dieter.
Hi, I'm Irene Dieter, and I live in the city of Alameda, and I was appointed by Ellen Corbett.
Thank you. Member Gregory. Member Gregory? He may not be here. Member Ho.
Oh, me?
Please.
Okay, it's kind of cut out a little there. Hi, I'm Adela Ho, and I'm semi-retired. I was Public Works Director at City of San Pablo. I was 20 years there, and I live in West Contra Costa County, and I'm an active user of the parks for running, bicycling, hiking, and mountain biking. And I was appointed by Elizabeth Eccles, and I'm also, this is my last year on the PAC. I'm terming out at the end of this year. And welcome to the new members.
Thank you. Member Lacey? I don't see her on the participation list. Sorry, I'm just looking for, okay. Member Mahadevan?
Oh,
You're muted, Dev.
You're on mute. Dev, you're on mute.
Carey.
Yeah, I mute myself. Forget that no one can hear me. Sorry about that. Dev Mahadevan. I was just saying I'm no longer a new member because I already attended one meeting last time I was a new member. Welcome, Marie, and our new general manager. Sabrina Landry. I am retired from healthcare executive, 45 plus years in hospitals, clinics, health plans. I worked for Kaiser Permanente for about 8 years. Gladly, that's all behind me. Now I enjoy Lake Chabot Park and other parks even more. Lots of days of running behind me now, mostly walking and hiking. Glad to be here and welcome to the new folks.
Thank you. Member Nathan.
I should have said that, sorry.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Mason. I am from Albany, California. I'm retired from running the League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Keep Tahoe Blue organization. Came back to my hometown. I'm appointed by the Alameda County Council of Mayors. My hobby is removing trash and graffiti from the Albany shoreline, and have been on the PAC for, this is my third year, I guess.
Thank you. Member Robinson.
Hi, Elisa Robinson from the city of Pittsburgh. I was appointed by Director Coffey as well. Welcome, Marie. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Member San Juan.
Hi, yes, Olivia San Juan. I live in Pleasanton, and I was appointed by Director Ann Wieskamp. I also currently serve as president of Zone 7 Water Agency out here in the Tri-Valley, and I'm also excited to share that today is World Water Day.
Thank you. Member Skardoff.
yeah, and I'm muted and everything. How about that? Yeah, I'm Igor Skardoff. I live in Martinez, and I'm representing the Contra Costa Special Districts Association. I'm especially excited these days because I'm also on the board of the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District, and we're struggling with how to become more inclusive and more diverse. And I see that's on our agenda here, and I'm really looking forward to getting some interesting insights and approaches on how to move in that direction.
Thank you. Member Satsui.
Hi, I'm Neil Tsutsui. I live in El Cerrito, and I was appointed by the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors. For my day job, I'm a professor of environmental science, policy, and management at UC Berkeley. And welcome to Marie. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. And Chair Rickard.
What about Roland?
Oh, I apologize. Member Williams? I didn't see his name.
I guess he's not here. Okay.
Yeah, he's not here.
Okay. Well, I'm Rick Rickard. I'm the chair. I live in Oakland, and I was appointed by Director D. Rosario.
Thank you. Also present this afternoon is Eric Fuller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, Chief Chiaburo, AGM of Public Safety, Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS, Lisa Baldinger, Legislative and Policy Analyst, Chantel Alatorre, Senior Planner, and Yolanda Barrel Knight, Clerk of the Board, Sydney with Prime Gov. I'm sorry, Captain Alan Love is also here. Did I miss anybody up? And also Lance Breed is here with Public Safety. And if I missed anybody else, please let me know.
I thought I saw Chief Chaparro earlier.
He's here. Yeah, I thought I said his name, but maybe
Oh, did you?
not.
I missed it. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
Juliana.
I was going to say, hi, Sharon.
Oh, thank you. All right. And that's it.
Thank you, Sharon. Today's committee meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order allowing for members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We're also providing live audio streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. This information can be found on the agenda on the district website, ebparks.org. Do any members of the committee have questions about the meeting procedures? If not, we will move to the approval of the minutes of the February 22nd, 2021 meeting.
I so move approval, Chair Rickard.
I'll second.
I had one
Yeah,
correction.
Okay. Discussion from, I know Adele, you wanted to make a correction, yes. Yeah. Oh, I think she froze.
Did you want me to go ahead with that?
Oh.
Yeah, at the end of the presentation about the public outreach work on following up on the dog study that the PAC worked on, I made a comment acknowledging that that was great work. It was nice to see that many of the recommendations were being implemented. And I also requested that at a future meeting, we get an update on some of the other recommendations that were more operational rather than public outreach and education.
Okay. So who made the motion?
I did. I'll accept that amendment.
Okay, and the second was by, do we have a second?
I'll be happy to second if nobody else has.
I thought it was
Okay. Oh, it's moved by Carlin and seconded by Igor with the a change as proposed by Adela. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Rickard. Vice Chair Obringer?
Yes.
Member Arce?
Abstain.
Member Best?
Yes.
Member Burke?
Yes.
Member Carey?
Hi, I'm here.
Member Chang? Member Chang? Okay. Member Claxton?
Yes.
Member Corkin?
Yes.
Member DeChambeau?
Yes.
Member Dieter?
Yes.
Member Ho?
Yes.
Member Lacey's not here. Member Mahadevan?
Yes.
Member Nason?
Yes.
Member Robinson?
Yes.
Member San Juan?
Yes.
Member Skardoff?
Yes.
Member Sutsui?
Yes.
And Chair Rickard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is comments from our board member represented today by Ward 6 board member Beverly Lane. So Beverly, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be with you today, and I think the items you've got on the agenda are particularly interesting. I represent, as Rick said, Ward 6, which is central Contra Costa County. So it's San Ramon to Concord and Pleasanton, Walnut Creek, out to a Marsh Creek Road. And parks that I represent are Briones, Diablo Foothills, Iron Horse, Regional Trail, Las Trampas, Bishop Branch, Morgan Territory, and Round Valley. So, you know, I think my ward is the most interesting of all of them, except that it does not have any shoreline. So I have to go to other people's wards to enjoy the shoreline, which I do. So what has been happening in Ward 6 in particular is a real increase in visitorship throughout the ward. And we talk about around 30% more visitors in the parks, and on trails, an increase that's larger than that, you know, can be up to 50%. And one of the challenges that we are facing, as I'm sure you've heard, is that, you know, we do not have all of our staff in the field because of COVID restrictions. And we have a lot of new park visitors who, some of whom do not pay attention to the rules. And so I'm glad, Rick, you and Oli are here, because what I'm hearing most complaints about are bikers who are acting as if the trails belong only to them. And when people object, providing rude gestures to those who object. And that's been not only a huge increase in Briones, but also on the Iron Horse Trail. So I was really happy last Tuesday when we had the board meeting as Contra Costa opened into the red tier to hear the announcement that our volunteer safety patrol is invited to come back into the parks. And that in particular, because I think it helps a tremendous amount to have these people with their identification on in the parks to work on educating our new visitors. And I thought it was extremely likely that since people go on the volunteer safety patrol because they want to be in the parks, that they were probably out in the parks anyway, but they weren't there identified as someone who could educate people on how to use the parks correctly. So I really appreciate the chief, and I think Captain Love and our attorney Carol Victor for working on this, because I hope that will make a difference in terms of people learning how to behave and share the trails in our parks. The other thing I'm happy about is they announced that the visitor centers will open late in April. So, you know, we are getting a little bit back to normal. You know, I had my second shot and I'm 2 weeks away from that. And I didn't really think that it would make that big a difference, but it makes me feel a lot better, even though, you know, I'm still wearing the mask and being careful, even in public. The other thing about COVID is, and I'm sure you've had information about it, is that it has been a struggle for us because we're an essential activity, and we want to keep everybody safe in our parks, and it's really been gratifying to have the new visitors, but it's been difficult to manage all of the parks at the same time. We still don't have rangers able to ride 2 per truck, and that really cuts back on our efficiency in the field. The other major thing that's happened is we have a new general manager, and you're going to get introduced to her pretty soon. So she joined the Park District on Monday, the 15th. And then finally, just to say that, Concord Hills Regional Park is, of course, in my ward, and things are roiling there. We haven't settled on what the name will be yet. And we are coping with anxieties about what the Sino housing development might be like, which is on the border of the Concord Hills Park. You had a clipping in your packet that talked about the approval of that development. And I wanted to point out that they approved a master plan, but they didn't have very much detail in it, which does leave them vulnerable for lawsuits. And the developer, Sino, has, of course, sued us over the impacts of Concord Hills Park on their development. So we are having conversations with them. We are having some negotiations going on. And we really don't like to be involved in litigation, but sometimes there are points where you either decide to make a decision to litigate and have an opportunity to get your desires heard, or you wait and then you don't have standing to have a discussion with someone who is very determined to do things that we feel will damage the park. So those conversations are going on this week, of course. And Brian Holt, who is here to talk about some other things, I think, is someone who could perhaps answer more in that regard if you are interested. So anyway, thank you very much for having me. And I was glad to mention how great the Doug O'Connell program was on Sunday. Enjoyed it very much, and I hope people will take the opportunity to go to his site and then look at it, because it was a tremendous program talking about the shorelines in the regional parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lane. I will second your comment about the Open Roads program. If any of you missed seeing it last night, it's well worth watching. Interviews with Robert Doyle, with a former PAC member, Bruce Bayard, who talks about the trail in Richmond, as well as directors Rosario and Corbett. So a very good program. But, thank you. Oli, I see your hand is raised. I will try to get to you when we get to public comments in a few minutes. At this point, I'll turn it over to Juliana Shermer for the foundation report.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all again. I know I was just here last month, so I'm not sure how much I really have to update you on in the last couple of weeks, but I will say 2021 has been a better year for the foundation than 2020. It's starting off at a really good pace. The kiosks had started collecting the memberships and payments again, so we're really seeing all of our members starting to renew and coming back. We're also getting into our spring fund development season. So we're reaching out to all of our grantors, and all of you, I'm sure, will be getting your spring appeal coming pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. But this is our annual opportunity to raise money for the camp programs for youth. As you know, we did transition where our funding went last year, and it went toward virtual programming. We are really looking forward to getting back in the parks this year. So our commitment is we'll do as much virtual as we need to, but our goal is to get those funds back so that we can see the families and kids back enjoying our parks in person. So knock on wood, with these vaccines coming out, we'll be able to see that happen really soon. Additionally, we are moving forward with our member survey that was delayed at the end of 2020. So hopefully that will be going out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll make sure that that is linked on all of the district channels and that you all have access to that as well. it's an opportunity for us to hear back for, the services that we're offering and also what people like to do and what they would like to see in the parks. And finally, I'll just say we're working with all of you. As Director Lane just said, we know our visitorship is up 30+%. In some parks, I would say even higher. So working on member and park constituent education through Compass Magazine, social media, and other avenues on just kind of that trail etiquette and what to expect while you're out there, who yields to whom, and all of those great things. We're backing up the district's communications on those. So Compass should be arriving in homes in June. So that is my update for today.
Thank you. Are there questions for Juliana? Okay, we'll move on. I believe we do have public comments. Oli, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me take the two that were in the queue earlier and then get to you, if that's all right. Sharon, do you want to introduce the comments? And
thank you, Chair Rickard. We have William Uregi that would like to speak. May I unmute yourself?
Thank you. There we go. I am unmuted, I hope. William Uregi. I'm with Mission Peak Conservancy. We were started in 2014 when the Park District negotiated changes at Mission Peak Regional Preserve in Fremont without the involvement of visitors. No park visitors were represented in negotiations. Today, the Park District is negotiating with the city of Fremont over 900 acres, which forms the base of the park. This is the main trail, Hidden Valley Trail, which is used by about 80% of the visitors to Mission Peak. Mission Peak, by the way, is one of the parks most used in the 73 parks within the East Bay system. We get today about 175,000 people from all over the region. That is down from 275,000 in 2014, when the city and the Park District started a campaign to drive the number of visitors down. They did this by reducing the hours of operation, by reducing parking from 2,000 slots to less than 200. That includes 42 in the actual staging area. And by increasing the number of citations from almost none inside the park to 300 that first year inside the park, and over 4,500 since outside the park. And those tickets, the tickets that they're handing out are for parking 18 inches from the curb, having a cracked windshield, lack of registration, parking in the front of a house, in front of a handicap zone, in front of a fire hydrant, etc. Our position is that this is a concern. So here's the bottom line. The district and the city are currently negotiating a lease extension, and we would love to have visitors represented in those negotiations. So the letter that I posted to the Tri-City Voice, which you have access to because I provided it to Ms. Stone earlier today, is basically saying, please allow visitors a seat at the table. And this is because visitors were not represented in 2014. And we're asking that we have an opportunity to negotiate in terms of the conditions that are going to be established between the park and the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. Sharon, I believe Kelly is the next.
Yes, thank you.
Oops. I am not muted. All right. So Deputy General Manager Alvarez asked at a meeting in January, she asked, what is our message? And who are the people we are serving? And those are really good questions. And we need to focus on those questions in communications. I'll look first at Vargas Plateau Regional Park. Morrison Canyon Road was designed in the 19th century for horse-drawn wagons. Until recently, it was a dangerous road for cars, 9 feet wide. As of 2018, the city converted it into a great new non-motorized trail for bikes and walking. However, at the January regular meeting of the Board of Directors, I heard general confusion and misunderstanding about whether the new Morrison Canyon Trail offers access to Vargas Plateau Regional Park. One director claimed that, quote, there might be some concern at the base because people are parking there and walking or biking up, but so far nobody has done anything about that. It's basically used to go up to probably mainly, some people could go further than the park, obviously, if they chose to. Well, actually, technically, no, you can't go further than the park. If you start walking up that road, no matter how far you go, no matter where you go, there is no legal exit for you to walk. Even if you go all the way to the freeway, it is not legal for you to walk on the freeway. You cannot legally escape that. That's a cul-de-sac. It's a long, long dead end. And the only exit from Morrison Canyon Road is ultimately you must come back down if you're walking. Another director said, quote, and I'm assuming at some point we'll make sure the public is familiar with the best way to access the park, and we'll publicize that about whether it's on our maps or on our website, just so people know to go the other way around. And Public Affairs agreed, quote, we've done a tremendous amount of effort on wayfinding. People do not use Morrison Canyon Road to access the park. I'd like to acknowledge we in Public Affairs will be updating maps and website with regards to Vargas Plateau and this road closure for our public. So this road was completely erased from the map several years ago, and that was the result of a very damaging, very harmful, and very costly litigation initiated by local property interests against the park district, which they won. So why can't the park district, now that the situation has changed, now that it's no longer a dangerous road, now that it's a nice trail, why can't the park district update its maps and bring it up to speed and recognize the reality that this is a brand new bike pedestrian trail? And why can't we put it on the maps again? And why can't we encourage people to use that trail? This confusion has to end. We have to realize what is the situation on the ground, who are the people we are serving, and what is in their best interests, the people who are walking and biking. It is no longer a road. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Ole, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Bruce Olson, resident of Pittsburgh, regular park user. My favorite trail is the Iron Horse. And I have two things to say. Number one, everybody here knows that we have a new regime in the White House. Rumor has it that they are going to spend a lot of money on infrastructure improvements. So I am urging this board, this committee, to urge management, to urge staff to get the applications ready. And I'm not talking about some rapid flashing beacons at crosswalks here and there on the trails. I'm talking bridges. I'm talking 10, 15, $20 million applications and lots of them. So if they have extra money, we have applications in line ready to spend that money for them. Thank you. Point two, if I could address Beverly Lane's concern about the Faria property on the Pittsburgh-Concord border, right on the edge of the new Concord Regional Park. Her concern was brought up during the discussion at the city council meeting, the city of Pittsburgh, when Mr. Sino himself was there saying, yes, you guys should approve my 1,500 houses. Somebody brought up the concern that you guys are suing East Bay Regional Parks. And Mr. Sino said, oh yeah, that's just a negotiating ploy. We always cooperate with the park district. That's a direct quote. Well, it's 2 weeks old. I might have adjusted a word or period in a sentence, but he basically said, don't worry about that lawsuit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ole. All right, Madam Secretary, are there any other public comments at this time?
No, there are not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on then to our presentations, and I'm very pleased to introduce our first presenter, who is our brand new General Manager. Welcome, Sabrina, to the Park District. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I am on day 5 3/4, I guess, at this point. And I already feel like I've been here much longer, but I in all the good ways. So it's been really fabulous. The warm welcome that I've received, both internally and externally, by everybody as I walk in here. Not to you all know can read my bio, but just to be somewhat brief about it and my background. I come from most recently I was the city administrator in the city of Oakland. I was the longest tenured city administrator, and I almost hit 5 years. I know that doesn't sound like very long, but it's a kind of a lifetime in that role. But had spent time in the organization as the budget director and the deputy city administrator so for several years, and certainly through the recession and some tough times. Also was the city manager in the city of Emeryville, which is a fabulous job. It is 1.1 square miles and a full service city, which was a great experience. And also spent some time, I've worked in Sacramento and also in DC, working in policy and legislative work. So I am absolutely thrilled to be able to kind of bring my different background. And I say different because I did not come up through parks, certainly have run large park departments. But bringing a little bit of a different perspective to this role, which is really exciting for me. I am a lifelong user of the parks. I was basically raised in these parks. My family's been here for many generations, and I have the great pleasure of actually raising my own kids in these parks. And I appreciated the new members' comments about how fun it is to now see these parks through your own children's lenses and experience them all over again as they start to explore and see the value of all of this. So this is deeply personal work for me. I can't really do this kind of job just in a random agency or a random jurisdiction. For me, this is very deep work. And so I really bring that personal connection to this. I'm really impressed in listening to you all and your background as you introduced yourselves. What a brain trust is sitting here, and I feel like, if we were to give you something and you all were able to gather for 48 hours together, you could probably solve any of the world's problems. Based off of the experience that's sitting in this meeting. So I'm really impressed by this group and your dedication to helping the district. The staff here is phenomenal. I think you'll find with my approach and my style is really about helping to coach them and to help facilitate so they can continue the really positive momentum that they all have developed alongside the leadership of the board and really of the community support, including you all. So thrilled to be here. I really want to just echo one thing that Member Burke said at the beginning, which was that we have all of this outdoor office space. And we have thousands of acres of outdoor office space. And I think we forget that sometimes. So I'm working kind of creatively as we're really trying to put together the plan on what our reoccupancy and kind of transition back to work, or not to work, but back to the workplace will look like for the district staff, and how we do that in a really safe way, while really trying to kind of bring people back together again in a way that everyone feels comfortable, and how we can creatively do that with all of this outdoor office space that we have. There's probably no other agency that has that opportunity. So I appreciate Member Burke's comment about that, and I think there's ways for us to do some of these meetings outside at some point. So with that, I will try to come to these maybe as often as I can, and I have already the long list of things that have been put on my calendar have been a little bit busy, but I will come to this as kind of as I can through my tenure. And certainly you have fabulous staff here that I'll communicate with as they need to. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome. Would you be willing to take a few questions if folks have them?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Any questions from anyone? Wow. I guess, oh, wait, Susie has a question.
Well, if nobody else has a more serious one, you're from the East Bay, but you went to MIT. How'd that happen?
That's a good question. I am a trained engineer. Yes, I will admit it. I love to solve problems. I think usually I get the question of how'd you go from being an engineer to being a public administrator. But yeah, no, I think part of the reason why I was attracted to go there is because I have such deep roots here in the Bay Area and kind of knew I'd be here long term, wanted to experience something different. And came running home after those winters. That was not my style.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Rochelle, you have a question.
Yeah. A lot of us are involved one way or another with local government, or have been appointed by local government bodies, or we've got people who work for private organizations that work with local government as well as the district. And I'd be interested in hearing if you, I don't want you to feel like you have to come up with something and that off the top of your head, but if there's anything that you could share with us about your thinking on the relationship between cities and the district. I think that would be great for us to kind of hear your vision on that. How do we partner? How can we help support the district, and what does the district think about our local government's participation in its work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. I sat as one of the larger next door neighbors to the district, and certainly had a lot of transactional work that we did together. And really, I have to say, hands down, at the staff level, at the transactional level, very good relationships. And there's 33 cities, so I can't speak for everybody and how they view things, but I will say that certainly at the kind of working level, I always found that we had a very good relationship. But that's not to say that there isn't more work that we can do. I think that's something that I'm committed to do, which is the cities have both the city managers for all 33 cities and also the mayors all have their own associations, and they all get together once a month. And it's something that I'm committed to do, which is to play an active role with the city managers, and also certainly to come to the mayor's conference for both counties to make sure that we continue to keep those partnerships really strong. They have to be fed just like everything else, and it's I have a great set of relationships myself with the two counties and with all of the city managers. So I think that there's certainly they deal with a whole host of issues, and how we kind of work together so that we can continue to help them, I think is a good way for us to approach it. But nobody's in this all by themselves. I think you all know that. I mean, I was telling staff earlier today, there's only one city, Alameda County, that gets to count itself as an island, and that's Alameda. Everybody else, there's nobody's an island, and Alameda still has a tunnel and bridges. So these are all relationships that I think just need to continue to be fostered. And I know at the board member level, those have been really strong and nurtured over the years, and I'll continue to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Rochelle, but I think there's just great work that goes on with each of the cities. And, I think just from my perspective, it'll continue, and I'll keep working to be present with them and in partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carlin and then Igor.
Thank you. Well, great question, Rochelle. That was kind of the same kind of question I had, especially since the city of Concord is going to need to work very closely with the Park District to move the new regional park forward. And so I think I would just say it's very exciting to see a woman in this role. And I look forward to getting to know you better, Sabrina, and to partnering with you. Thank you.
Great.
Igor, you're muted. Igor, you're on mute.
I looked up there, it didn't show the little mute sign on my. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I would like to welcome you to this great enterprise that we're all part of here. And I was wondering if you have a particular, might you say, a signature that you would like to bring to this organization? Kind of a funny question to ask right at the beginning like this, but say, what would you like to be remembered for, however many years down the road after you've been in this job for a while?
That's a great question. I guess a couple things I'll share with you. One, first and foremost for me, is kind of how I think about my role and my priorities. And really it starts with the staff of the district, and really core to my management philosophy, and really kind of the way that I've run organizations in the past, is that if the staff that works here doesn't feel like they're being supported and treated like the professionals that they are, then I don't really care what the public or the board or what the general manager really wants to get done. It's not going to happen. And so, that's something for me, which is just continuing to make sure that this is an employer of choice, and that we have this incredible staff that's here. But for me, it's about making sure that they're prioritized, and that I'm doing my job to make sure that they're supported and able to do their work. So I would say that's one that's not as sexy and popular as most people say. But if you really want to, my grand vision, this might be an eye roll, but I think this agency has an opportunity not just to be the best park district, special district, but I think it has the opportunity to be to set the example and the bar for all public agencies. It has every piece of the puzzle that in order to really to be the premier local government agency in the country. So that to me is the goal. It's not just about being the biggest and the best of the park district or special district, but I really honestly believe that we can set the example and the bar for all public agencies with all the tools that we have here.
Well, welcome aboard. I guess there's not much danger of thinking too small.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much, Sabrina. Again, welcome. And we will look forward maybe to meeting you in person one of these days and having more interactions, but we're glad to have you on board.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the strategy for inclusive community engagement. And I'm not sure, Carol Johnson or Juliana, who is introducing this?
I think I am, Rick.
Oh, okay. Hi, Eric.
Hi. But I do want to thank Carol Johnson and Juliana for their support of this effort. And as you'll see in presentation, there's a lot of partners in it, cross-divisionally. But this is an extension of what we learned when we passed Measure FF in 2018, in that we outperformed our polling by about 7 points. And it led us to think about who are the people that are voting to support us that weren't actually being interviewed or surveyed by our polling firm. And so in 2019, under the project management of Lisa Baldner, who will also present tonight with me, we did a far wide-ranging survey of the public online, and we also had some hard copies at our visitor centers. We got over 8,000 responses, and what they highlighted is how people wanted to be communicated with. So we realized that people were responding to the survey on their phones, and that led us down the road of thinking, well, we need to have a polling firm that can actually ask questions on people's phones in text. So we did a scientific survey in 2020, which reaffirmed the results that we received from the 2019 broader survey. And as we examined those results, we realized that there was a segment of the population that we needed to pay more attention to in terms of listening and understanding and engaging. So with that, I think I will ask Lisa to pull up the presentation, because I think I'm on the second slide already. Next slide, please. And so as part of the goals, we wanted to make sure that we were gathering information and listening, as I mentioned, to the broader community. And with that information, it can help us with our service planning, amenity planning, but also it's really super important with regard to grant proposals. And Ollie, you'll be happy to know we're working on one right now for active transportation. We're also needing more and more community engagement on our planning processes, and Brian could speak to that later. And it's just overall from a communications standpoint, I know Carol Johnson has been working on trying to develop a district-wide sort of blueprint about how we engage with the community in a public way, public-facing way. So this was an effort to sort of memorialize that and have a planned approach to it. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we don't have a full-time employee that's focusing on community engagement in this way. So as you can see, this is a wide-ranging cross-departmental team effort that's moving communication forward internally, but also will ultimately help us develop an external strategy. And no one person or individual can do it alone, but together we can create a system that lightens the load and moves our engagement strategies more forward. So I think with that, I will turn it over to Lisa for the next part of the presentation. Lisa?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Lisa Bollinger, and I'm a management analyst in the Government Affairs Division. And I'll be going over the 3 elements of the strategy for inclusive community engagement. So the first is our listen category, which is consisting of facilitated community discussions, both in a listening session forum on Zoom, which I'll dive into a little bit more, as well as through a community survey, which we look forward to partnering with you all on as time avails. Our next is to coordinate. So this is an internal public engagement plan for coordinated efforts of external engagement with stakeholders in the public. And then the third is our understand. And the understand is intended to be local community information guides of our 6 interpretive zones, understanding who the community is, their interests, the identified barriers, and some community stakeholders within each zone. So with that, I'll give a deeper overview of each project, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So first, our facilitated community discussions. These are being guided by the UC Davis Center for Regional Change. As Eric shared, this is a continuation of our 2019 Park and Public Interest Survey. In the 2019 survey, which was put out across the full district, on the website, on social media, in the parks, we had an intern surveying on tablets. It was offered in English, Spanish, Korean, and Chinese, traditional Chinese, and we received over 8,000 responses. And these responses were mappable, and what we saw when we mapped out the data and when we reviewed the demographics is that both geographically as well as demographically, we had low response areas. And as you can see, as part of this continuation study, we're working to make an authentic and inclusive space to have discussions related to that original survey questionnaire, as it had information on it about current programs, future programs, barriers to access. And so to date, we were able to host 3 community listening sessions. Thank you to those Park Advisory Committee members who took 90 minutes out of your day to join us. The first listening session consisted of members of the Park Advisory Committee or Multicultural Advisory Committee and folks who were strongly connected to the Park District to speak about what brought you to engage with the Park District, what makes it a worthwhile effort, and who are you not seeing at the tables. Leveraging the knowledge and community of the original listening session, we then had 2 additional listening sessions with community groups and community members who don't currently participate on any of these stakeholders or community forums with the Park District to have the same sort of discussion of how engaged do you feel you are, what could we do more of, and how do you believe that we could get a survey out to the public to get more input from the community you're here representing today. So we're really excited in May of this year to launch again a 4-language survey with the partnerships of these community members who have participated in our listening sessions to date. So we will be keeping the Park Advisory Committee apprised of that upcoming survey and look forward to getting it out into the community. Our second, our coordinate, this is our internal public engagement plan, which is being guided by Shalana De Silva, a professional consultant. And the goal of this internal public engagement plan is, as Eric shared, this is not an effort we're doing alone. And as we're partnering on these in-park surveys and on the facilitated community discussions, we saw just strength in the internal partnership and cross-divisional support of these activities. And so as part of this project, we've extended it to be a reflection on our internal coordinating between divisions to really create space for cross-divisional lifts of external engagement to help the district do more and create more inclusive spaces so that as maybe one division goes forward with a regulatory engagement meeting, they could also invite our interpretation and recreation division from that area to come and speak about kayaking or other elements to really kind of grow our community connections and relationships. So this process is starting with internal interviews and then will result in a coordination plan. And then our third element is our local community information guides. This is being led by a team of environmental and policy management master's students from the University of California at Davis. And what these students are doing is they are taking GIS demographic information, park use data, as well as our community surveys that included zip codes to create mappable information and community stakeholder information to create 6 local community information guides. The 6 guides are our interpretive zones. And once the guides are complete, we can share them both with the public, with elected officials, as well as with our in-park staff to memorialize an understanding of who the community is, because we have so much movement within the park district. When a park ranger goes from maybe say Del Val to Crown Beach, well, that's a whole new community to get to know. And so by creating this sort of memorialized information, partnering with our human resources department to provide trainings on these guides, it could help bridge relationships and extend them for many, many years as staff change locations and turnover occurs. So all 3 of these projects are on a timeline to provide deliverables in June of this year. And we really look forward to bringing those back to the Park Advisory Committee to share with you all. So the deliverable for the facilitated community discussions will be a report as well as guidance on how to expand our community relationships. And additionally, just the Park District will continue to create space for these discussions. The coordinate will result in an internal public engagement plan to help guide external engagement. And the local community information guides will be a public-facing document, both in hard copy form as well as through an interactive website, providing information on who our community is and what their interests are. This is just a quick timeline of where project discussions are happening. So we were able to share it with our internal executive team in January, our board legislative committee in February. It will be a part of the board workshop discussion this Friday. And today we're sharing it with you all. And we look forward to bringing it before our Multicultural Advisory Committee, our Regional Parks Foundation, and any other forum really that we could have these continued discussions with. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass it back to either Rick or Eric.
I think we're available for questions, but wanted to just again acknowledge all the additional support we have received from all the different divisions, and we're very happy and pleased that everybody has been enthusiastically embracing this approach. And just wanted to give again a shout out to Carol Johnson, Juliana, and Christina Kelchner, who also helped in the formation of the three-legged stool that this is a strategy.
Great, thank you. I see a couple of questions. Andrew, you have a question?
Yes, I had unmuted. Are you willing to share at this time what some of the underengaged areas are, or are we going to wait for the report to come out? Am I audio?
Yeah,
yes,
you're
sorry,
on.
you are good. I was looking to pull it up. So in terms of geographic areas that we recognize that we could strengthen engagement, East Contra Costa County was an area, and we were grateful to have a number of attendees from Brentwood and Antioch join us at our listening sessions, as well as East Oakland specifically was a low response area geographically. Additionally, in terms of demographics, we had low responses from Black, Indigenous, and people of color, from youth. And then we also wanted to just acknowledge strengthening LGBTQ community relationships at our stakeholder tables, as well as members of the disability community and immigrant groups, excuse me.
Thank you.
Igor.
Well, thank you. I believe I'm unmuted this time. I'm really gratified to see the kind of approach you're taking, which starts out with listening. That's a really key thing. And as we've already demonstrated, that's affected how you proceed from there. And I just wanted to encourage continuing that sort of a attitude towards this whole thing. So I was wondering if you have some kind of an idea of what kind of benchmarks, or what would success look like to you? So what kind of manifestations might show up as saying, "Oh, okay, we're really progressing and we're moving towards our goal"?
Great question. So I think in terms of how we would identify success in this project is, I would quite frankly share that I already feel that we've had success. The outcome of our listening sessions, we had over 45 attendees from different geographic and demographic backgrounds and experiences. And they entered our 90-minute discussions with such an open dialogue. And the interest in making park spaces more accessible, welcoming, and incurring a sense of belonging. And so from that perspective, we've already had some success in this work. And in terms of long-term success, one would be seeing this help influence who's at some of our different stakeholder tables, such as some of the individuals have already asked to join our multicultural advisory committee as an outcome of this project. So we're already expanding seats at the table. Love to see that also at the environmental roundtable, or perhaps someday at the park advisory committee. Additionally, in terms of the internal guide, seeing that implemented by staff and utilized, and we're already seeing as an outcome of these discussions, just and maybe it's also just an outcome of the Zoom type format, is more cross-divisional work. It's been something that we've been striving for since the 2019 project began. And then lastly, the local community information guides are probably the most hard you can hold in your hand and see and understand if it was something that's valuable. And then from 5 years from now, a big sign of success is, do we want to do this again? Do we want to continue this? Do we want to duplicate this project with new information at a new point in time, with a growing and expanding and changing community? And if this is something that the Park District is interested in continuing for years to come, I think that would be probably the biggest sign of success.
And I just would like to add to that. That's an excellent summary, Lisa. And what I was going to say in terms of it's already been a success, I think the fact that we are having cross-divisional communication about external communication is a sign of success. And then to kind of say what Lisa just said a little differently is that this is ongoing work. And so we're at a moment in time where the work we're doing is going to inform the next, layer of work, whether it's on our DEI work, or as Lisa indicated, maybe we do another deeper dive in 5 years or 3 years to recalibrate, because we know people will be communicating differently with each other. We already know that from this year or from 2020. Yeah. So I think it's a living piece of work that I think the success will be if it continues to live and be something that is embraced by our colleagues and the public.
Great, thank you. Annie, you have a question.
Well, first, thank you for that presentation. It's really so clear that you've thought through this from lots of different angles and from lots of different perspectives. So thank you for sharing what you shared. My question was about internal, it kind of builds on the questions that have already been asked. So it's maybe more of a comment, and also just to reflect back something that I heard, which is that you're listening and wanting to learn more about communities. But I also heard in your presentation that the district is going to change because of those relationships. Like the connections that you have and the relationships that are within staff will need to adapt to what you learned from the outside. And I guess I heard that in your response to the other questions. And I guess to ask a question is, how intentional is that in terms of how you're set up internally to adapt to whatever you learn? If there are opportunities to engage with communities differently than you are now, and you need to adjust how you're structured, how open is the district to that kind of adjustment?
Thank you for that question. And I would say for exactly what you're highlighting is the reason why in parallel to the external listening, we began the internal coordinating in order to identify where staff needs additional support to do expanded engagement, or where staff could be partnering with each other to help carry the load a little bit better. And so we are hoping that the two work in parallel, and at the end of both the internal interviews and the external surveying and community discussions, we could be in a place that the two would complement each other to take that next step forward together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for the presentation. I think every time you come, I see you, not always here at the PAC, but you're sharing very interesting data that you guys have collected throughout the district. And it's great to see you diving deeper into it, especially since I know that I kind of fall into multiple categories on the list of unrepresented people that you guys have identified, East County and a person of color. And also East Oakland, are you guys targeting specifically people that live in these geographic areas to come in and participate in the listening sessions?
Yes. So we did an inventory of sort of community groups within these different geographic areas. And we also spoke with county supervisors' offices and elected officials to learn about maybe who they could share an invitation to the listening session with. And we were able to get good participation from both areas. And then sort of our next step is taking it even further with the survey, because we can share that far and wide, and there's no sort of, like we can have 100 people, 1,000 people do the survey versus listening sessions were sort of 20 people per listening session. And so we have even more opportunity from there. And then additionally, once this project is concluded, the opportunities aren't over, and we can just continue sort of expanding our community relationships. So.
And in the earlier data that we were speaking about from 2020 and 2019 helped informed where we purposely and intentionally engaged because we could identify, as Lisa mentioned on the map, areas where we weren't getting participation. And so those were the focus areas for the listening sessions and for trying to have people join us from those specific geographic areas and communities.
That's amazing, because I was doing a needs assessment in East Contra Costa County myself, and getting people to engage with me as a member, like a representative for the government, was challenging. So you say Parks, you guys just have this great aura about the park district, and people love you. So it's great to see that the engagement is carried through.
And I believe Carlin has a question.
Thank you. Yes. So excellent work. And just, I apologize if I missed it, but could you share with us which languages you provided the outreach? And did you have interpreters there? Was the survey in multiple languages?
The 2019 survey was offered electronically in English, Spanish, traditional Chinese, and Korean. And this was based off of guidance from our public affairs team, and specifically Monaco. And it was also offered in parks in hard copy in both English and Spanish. For the upcoming survey in May of 2021, we will not be offering hard copies at this time because of safety, but we will be again providing it in English, Spanish, traditional Chinese, and Korean. And we are also working with community advocates to ensure that you can read it on a screen reader so that those who are blind can also actively participate. And we're working within the guidelines that have been provided for us in terms of what questions can be read without visible sight.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, I think Olivia has a question.
Hi, yes, thanks so much. This is such a great overview. And also thank you. I had the opportunity to participate in one of the listening sessions. And one of the ideas that I thought of while listening during the listening session was thinking about, because one of the comments that came up from some of the members in my smaller group was notification and outreach and not being familiar with who to go to for a permit for, one of the special nonprofit groups that one of the members in my listening group was a part of. And I believe specifically in regards to this group, it was a group where there might be people who were differently abled and maybe needed a little bit extra support in terms of, the types of vehicles, the types of vans that they would be bringing to the park, and also access to the park. And it made me think about something, and I think I brought this up a couple of years ago in another one of these park advisory committee meetings. And it made me think a little bit about your database. And I know this is such a back end, not a forward facing type of topic, but I'm curious what the park district uses to keep track of all the different contacts that the district has, and also what some of the longer term, maybe if we're looking at the next 5 year effort is to manage this contact database. And I know we don't want to necessarily go into the details tonight, but I think that there is an opportunity here. And I know, we're here in the Bay Area where Salesforce just built a huge tower in San Francisco, and I know they have a very generous nonprofit organization in terms of accessing Salesforce software for managing this type of situation. So I just want to make sure that that data point gets out to you, and that's something that, on the front, it isn't really something that's as exciting to talk about as some of the other topics, but I think it might also help the park district on the back end, meet some of the goals and some of the items that are coming out of these listening sessions in this effort.
Absolutely. And that idea of collecting information and sharing it from colleague to colleague in terms of contacts, and also having sort of identifying who has that strong relationship to be able to connect with the different community groups is on our mind and is part of that internal coordination discussion. And we expect it to be a recommended outcome of the internal coordination plan. And I heard Eric start to talk, so sorry.
No, I was just going to say that that's a great suggestion, Olivia. I do thinking about the database as basic as that sounds is something, and I'm glad you flagged it for us.
Michael Gregory, you have a question.
Well, mostly a comment. I just want to applaud the district for taking this on. I think the opposite of a small organization or small goal, this is really approaching world-class status, that we're able to add this to the bandwidth of what the park does. The deliverables are kind of interesting. What jumped out at me was, if I understood this correctly, let's say a ranger or park employee going from Del Val to Crown Beach is jumping a few things culturally. And so if one of the outcomes is training staff so that they can rotate as staffing needs arise, and be prepared to manage as opposed to not managing well, That's a key deliverable. The other thing is deliverables to the public. So I think if I hope I'm seeing this correctly, one of the deliverables will be showing and demonstrating to the public that we are welcoming and including and doing what we can to provide access. And it's a struggle, but my gosh, we're facing it or taking it on, and that should be conveyed through the regular activity guides, which I read cover to cover. I hope others do. And if it becomes obsolete, we'll have to find another way of doing it. But just comment thanking you for taking this on. It's tough work. Thanks again.
Michael, if I could respond to your first point, and Lisa may want to respond to the second. That idea of a sort of a guide for staff actually came from our HR department because we've had this historic turnover at the Park District where somebody like Ira Bletz worked at Ardenwood for 25 years. When he knew the community. I mean, he still works at the district, but he's not at Ardenwood. But he had all the connections. And so once you remove some of those long-term staffers from places where they know the community fairly well, new people coming in may not have those connections. And so this is hopes to be an aid for people on staff that are coming into a situation where they may or may not know the community, and it provides some guidance and some contacts and some path forward to engaging and listening and being, being what we can be for the community.
Thanks. Okay. At the very least, a cheat sheet. But we can do better than that.
Do you have anything to add, Lisa?
No, but I do see Director Lane's hand.
Oh, Director Lane.
Yes, I am really pleased that we're going in this direction. And for me, many of our past surveys, I was always concerned that we were surveying park users. We weren't getting underneath to why people are not in the parks. And I think this is such an important step for us. I do wonder about the community guides because sometimes I've been involved in groups that say, oh, we really need something that explains who the conducts are and the lay of the land and da-da-da, and then nobody uses them. They sit on the shelf and then they don't get updated and then they're useless. And so I'm looking at you said 6 community guides, right? In a East Bay that is extremely diverse. So I guess I'm wondering how you're going to manage it and update it and who will make use of the guides and how 6 are going to get to what you want to do.
Thank you. So the initial guides are being put together by a team of the master's students. And they, as part of their process, are also putting together a how they put it together guide of the guides for the update purpose. So they have that sort of within their vision that this needs to be something that the Park District can update regularly. And of course, in terms of updating regularly, we would be leaning, and I do know Brian Holt is on the Zoom, on our fantastic GIS division, who has that capability to help create updated maps within a format. Now, will it be updated regularly in hard copy format? Will it be updated regularly more on the online platform? I think that would be something that come 5 years from now, we would do an inventory on what was used, what was the best benefits of this project, and then go from there. But in terms of the current progression of pulling it together, the students are, they've been instructed to put together a guide that could be updated regularly and have that backup material when presenting the end product in order to do so.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
Yes. I see that Marie has a question. I will turn to her. I want to, let's make this the last question if possible, because we have 2 more items on our agenda and it's getting late. So Marie, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I apologize if this is something that's been discussed before, but I'm wondering if, when looking at, the groups that we're communicating with, if it's an opportunity to possibly have an app. I know a lot more people are increasingly, interacting with the world through, app-based programs, and was constantly having to update, the guides. Being able to roll out some type of app might help reach a lot more members of our community.
Absolutely, and that's something that is on staff's mind in terms of the awareness of the app. We've had some wonderful conversations with Los Angeles County Park District, who have their own app, and they've had a lot of success with it in terms of understanding who's using the parks, but also during COVID, sharing notifications on updates of what's going on in the parks. And so we are in initial conversations, but probably I would say the biggest barrier to an app is that it is not an insignificant cost. So should the district choose to go that direction, it would be a large investment by our board's direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's what I was thinking is with COVID and things changing, like it seemed like in the beginning, every other day, that it's a great platform to be able to update the park users on what's allowed and what's not. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, I believe we have one public comment.
You do, Mr. Abreu.
Kelly.
Thank you very much. When it comes to public outreach and messaging, Mission Peak just had a great new example. Brand new signs were designed and posted out there on the sidewalks, several sidewalks and inside the park too. And they focused on a specific message that the park district considers to be so important that it designed and posted brand new signs. Talks about parking violations, littering, and neighborhood noise. But if you think about it, this message is very one-sided. The message is neither welcoming nor inclusive. It verges on finger pointing and blame, but doesn't quite get there, but it verges on it. And if you look at it from the other side, if you look at it again, go back and look at what Deputy General Manager Alvarez asked. What is our message and who are the people that we are serving? And when you think about it from that point of view, you would hear that you've been hearing, because I've been telling this committee in particular that medical emergencies at Mission Peak are common, that dehydration is the #1 cause, and I got that information from experts. The city fire department even bought a very expensive off-road dune buggy. And it carries paramedics and their equipment up the mountain slopes, carts people off in need of medical help, many of them with dehydration problems. So there's a need for mental health advisories and for health messaging, and it's a very real need. And instead of posting and designing and publishing the messages that only focus on parking violations, why not do what we've been asking for several years? Why not ask the park staff to post specific messaging on how much water to carry with you when you go up the mountain? A little concern about the health and safety of your park visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Lisa and Eric. Very interesting presentation. We'll see you again in the near future, I'm sure. The next item on our agenda is the Shoreline Adaptation Overview. I believe, Brian, are you introducing that?
I am introducing that, and I'm presenting this evening with Matt Grawl, Chief of Stewardship, and Chantal Alatori, Senior Planner. So we're going to be presenting on managing shoreline parks in the face of a changing climate. And this is climate change, sea level rise is obviously of great interest to most. I wish I could say all, but to most. But thankful that it is fortunately accepted science at the federal government again. But we often get the question from the public and from our board just what the Park District is doing to address sea level rise. So we wanted to put together this presentation to give an overview of some of our recently completed projects, successful projects, some of our ongoing planning, and really how the Park District engages in a lot of the regional efforts that are ongoing. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And then okay, go through here. You all able to see that? Is that okay? So again, I'm Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS. I'm here with Matt Grawl, Chief of Stewardship, and Chantal Alatorre, Senior Planner. So as we all know, and for those of you who were able to watch the open road segment on our shoreline, which was a great segment that aired this weekend, the Park District manages a number of shoreline parks. We have 55 miles of shoreline, so we're acutely aware of the threats that sea level rise pose to our resources, pose to our infrastructure, and really how do we protect the public access and the recreation that's so important on the shoreline. Our first shoreline park was acquired in 1966, and that was at Miller Knox in Contra Costa County. And since that time, the Park District has invested over $85 million in acquisition of nearly 12,000 acres of shoreline in the East Bay. So a real significant investment in protecting the shoreline and restoring the shoreline, as much of these properties were industrial sites, dumps, and contaminated areas. And then since 1988, that was when Measure AA passed, the Park District's invested over $184 million in shoreline improvements along the East Bay shoreline. So just going through a couple of our successful projects, the Dawson Family Marsh. This is at Point Pinole on the Richmond shoreline, named after the family of former director Whitney Dawson, who was a longtime an environmental justice advocate and advocated for protection of the shoreline through the North Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and just through his advocacy over many years, including on our board. And this was a $14 million habitat restoration and public access project. And this was one of the first projects where really incorporated sea level rise projections to plan for rising seas, so habitats could migrate to anticipate those changes. And you can see here the elevated boardwalk here, so we could continue to protect that public access in that area through the years. Berkeley Meadow, another important urban park, McLaughlin East Shore Park, a $6 million restoration and public access project that restored habitat there, but incorporated public access as well, and built to respond to rising seas. Our recently completed Bay Point regional shoreline restoration, and really one of the Park District's most underserved community in Bay Point, northern Contra Costa County. And this was a $5.3 million public access and restoration project that was able to open up just last year during COVID. And that provides a kayak launch, restored habitats, and new shoreline access. And again, designed with rising sea projections in mind, and to be responsive and adaptive to those changes. And then Albany Beach, the Bay Trail access that has opened up there, which has just been hugely popular, provides just incredible vistas and really closed one of the key gaps in the Bay Trail network. So not only restoring public access, restoring the beach there, but also providing that key active transportation connection through closure of gaps in the Bay Trail. And then our recently completed Encinal Breakwater Beach restoration on the Albany, or not Albany, I'm sorry, Alameda shoreline, which restored dunes, provided new beach access there. So $1.5 million beach investment in that area. So those are just some of our recently completed, just in the past couple of years, shoreline restoration and public access projects. But I wanted to give Chantal Alatorre an opportunity to discuss two of our projects. And I have to acknowledge Chantal is she's really taken leadership and a couple years ago led the effort to secure grant funding for the Bay Trail Risk Assessment and Adaptation Prioritization Plan, and has helped lead the partnership with Hayward and Hayward Area Park and Recreation District in developing the Hayward Shoreline Adaptation Master Plan. And she can give us some more details on those. So, Chantal?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to take the time to talk about two projects, two planning efforts, like Brian mentioned. The first one is the San Francisco Bay Trail Risk Assessment and Adaptation Prioritization Plan, otherwise known as the RAP for short. So I'll just go ahead and dive into that one. Next slide. So I should take a step back. As Brian mentioned, back in 2018, we were kind of starting to have this conversation about how the Park District was going to proceed with the climate change awareness that that was coming to the forefront. And so some of the planning drivers for the two projects that I'm going to talk about were, of course, our environmental ethic of continuing to provide healthful recreation while protecting the habitat. And then also in 2018, the Park District Board of Directors adopted our climate policy framework. So with that awareness of our environmental ethic and with the environmental policy, with the climate policy framework that was adopted, right around the same time, Caltrans put out their SB1 Adaptation Planning Grant Program. And so that's the grant that Brian mentioned previously. And so both of these two projects that I'm going to talk about are funded through this grant planning opportunity through Caltrans. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the RAP is one of the planning projects that I'm going to be discussing. The RAP really looks at the sea level rise for the Bay Trail that the Park District operates or manages. And so the Park District operates about 48 miles of Bay Trail across our 55 miles of shoreline. And what the RAP does is it looks at the vulnerabilities to the Bay Trail from sea level rise, also looks at the ecological impacts from sea level rise, and looks at the public access impacts. So we're looking at sea level rise, ecological impacts, and public access, and then identifying how best can the Park District proceed with strategic partnerships in order to strengthen those areas. Next slide. And so this visual here is a representation of what the RAP project planning process looked like. So initially we looked at the entire shoreline, understanding the context, the land use, the ecology, the infrastructure, looked at the entire 48 miles of Bay Trail that the Park District owns or operates. Then after looking at the entire Bay Trail at a high level, then we narrowed it down to 8 priority segments. And these segments were chosen based off of different hazards, their exposure, and their vulnerability. These 8 segments were deemed the most at risk, and I'll go ahead and dive into that in a second. But after going into those 8 segments, then we decided to come up with 2 different adaptation projects or prototype projects that would then allow the Park District to create a toolkit of different adaptation strategies that we could then replicate at other sites. So we went from the full big picture shoreline of the 48 miles of Bay Trail to then narrowing it down to 8 specific sites. And then through risk assessment and stakeholder and community input and funding feasibility, narrowed it down further to 2 more. And those 2 are the ones that I will dive into next. Next slide. So the 8 segments of the Bay Trail that were selected were based upon the coastal hazards, potential for ecological restoration, adjacent critical infrastructure, and of course the proximity to disadvantaged communities. And these 8 sites were spread out throughout both counties. So I'll go ahead and read them. We had at the north part, we had North Richmond, and then Miller Knox, East Shore State Park, Alameda Point, Crown Beach, MLK Shoreline, Coyote Hills, and then the Spine Trail down in the southern area. And those, as you'll see in the next slides, the more intense red areas were the ones that were ultimately, selected. Next slide. And so the first one was Alameda Point, and as you can see, it's shown here in the yellow. So this portion is what will be the future Northwest Territories regional shoreline. So this is not a piece of property that we own yet, but it is one that we are actively planning for. Next slide. And so some of the site considerations here were the adaptability of the Bay Trail, the potential for restoration and habitat creation, the potential for the interpretation and education component. And then of course, we needed to be really creative here and make sure that we developed an adaptation strategy that was able to be implemented with the terrains, because it is an artificially filled area with high wave action. And one thing that is extremely important to note is that because this was a formal naval base, there is this legacy of contamination. And so that is something that we are considering through this planning process. Next slide. And so the consultant team looked at two potentials for the site. One of them, which we're calling the full potential, and the opportunities here are enhanced ecological benefits, an enhanced Bay Trail experience. But of course, the constraints, as I mentioned, were the Navy site cleanup, the low-lying elevation, and then the ongoing coordination with the VA, which will be one of the stakeholders, or which is one of the stakeholders, and then the city of Alameda. So working together with the other two stakeholders and ourselves in order to create a plan for this area that is resilient to sea level rise. So this is what it looks like if we're able to work through all our constraints and our challenges. And then the next slide will highlight alternative potential number 2, which is more of a limited potential. It will still create modest wetland habitat around the estuary, and it is possible with the known constraints. So we have two potential scenarios depending on how the planning and coordination goes in the future. Next slide. And then the second site that we looked at through the RAP is East Shore State Park. And the site that we're looking at within the park is just south of the Tom Bates Sports Field Complex. Next slide. And some of the site considerations here were similar to what Alameda Point, with the enhanced Bay Trail experience, recreational access for disadvantaged communities, restoration potential at Berkeley Meadow, interpretation and education, and then also daylighting Schoolhouse Creek. And so this site is different from the previous in that we have mainly one key stakeholder, which is the city of Berkeley. And so we have been in coordination with them to discuss the potential for this site and how this can tie into other amenities that the city of Berkeley provides. Next slide. And so with these constraints in mind, the consultant team that we selected has created this rendering of the potential for East Shore State Park. So this highlights the daylighting of Schoolhouse Creek, the potential for Bay Trail, the treatment of the coarse beach, and then the restoration of the upland meadow. Next slide. And so that was one, the RAP. And then the second one that I'm going to talk about with Matt is the Hayward Shoreline Adaptation Master Plan. And this one is a little different because it was led by HASPA, which is a Joint Powers Authority comprised of East Bay Regional Park District, the city of Hayward, and also Hayward Area Recreational and Park District. And so the objectives here are to create a resilient shoreline for people in the ecology, enhance shoreline to reduce the risk of critical infrastructure, and then continue to build social resiliency in the community, and as well as the capacity for future adaptation, because we want these lands to continue to remain publicly accessible. Next slide. So even though this planning effort looked at just one of our parks, unlike the RAP, which looked at essentially the entire shoreline, it was still very complex. The visual that you can see here, every color is a different landowner, which means that every color is a different stakeholder. So this project also required extensive coordination and really trying to identify how to balance the needs of the lead agency, which was HASPA, and also the neighboring agencies that you can see listed here. And so in the next slide, Matt will go ahead and walk us through the plan, the proposal for this site, and then I'll go ahead and come back and talk about the engagement process that we've had for both of them.
Okay, thank you, Chantal. Thanks for the introduction and the overview. So this plan, as Chantal said, is focused in the Hayward area, and the primary agencies that were involved in this planning effort were the City of Hayward and the Hayward Area Recreation District. But many other stakeholders were involved as Chantal just described. And the projects throughout this planning area are going to have various champions, and agencies will lead them. And so within this area, there's projects that are more focused on the City of Hayward's interest, and others that are more focused on the Park District's interests of our existing lands. But really, we're trying to protect all these areas in a coordinated way, and to make sure all of our interests are considered, and we're really protecting the habitat and access for the Bay Trail. So in this current figure, it's a little hard in this figure to see, but on the outer edge, the orange line that goes out along the edge of the bay, if you're familiar with it, that's the Bay Trail now. And the Bay Trail runs on the western edge of this property, all along the shoreline. Over time, we know that it's going to become impractical and infeasible to maintain the Bay Trail out along the shoreline. We're already having issues with erosion, and we have to do maintenance projects every couple years to protect the shoreline from erosion. And the king tides are already overtopping the trail in certain times of the year. So, and because of the way it was constructed in the past, it's really not going to be possible to reinforce it and protect it on the outer edge of the shore and provide protection there. There'd be significant impacts to habitat and just extremely expensive construction to construct out on the edge of the bay for those FEMA flood protection levees. So in order to protect the area and also protect the marsh habitats, at some point we have to relocate the Bay Trail to an inland, and ideally it would go along this dark orange line, and then stay on basically on the eastern edge of the property, but it still have some blue water experience, and you would still be on the edge of these marshes, and we would still have good access to those marsh areas in this new alignment. But it would also protect the trail against sea level rise. So we're really looking for adaptable ways to maintain that access and to make it also able to protect the resources of the area as the sea level rise. In the southern area, we have the Hayward Marsh, which is slated for restoration. And that's happening now, where the design for the restoration of that area. Currently, that area is operated as a wastewater treatment marsh, but the Park District's looking to convert it to a fully tidal, with maybe some muted tidal areas, and to protect the least turn colony that's there, but then expand the marsh habitat in that region. So we're currently working on that design. Most of that project is within the city, the Park District's area of ownership. And so it's really a project the Park District will be taking on for the most part, but there will be many other stakeholders within the community and the Fish and Wildlife agencies that really want to see this restoration be successful. And so you'll be hearing much more about that project as it's designed and developed. And we're also looking at projects in the Orloma Marsh area. And these, though, are being led by others. So in the Orloma Marsh area, on that eastern edge, you can see that green line that has some arrows on it that shows it's a figure to represent wastewater going through a living levee. The idea would be to have a horizontal levee that has some natural habitat features, and they could also potentially convey stormwater and wastewater. And so the East Bay Discharges Authority currently has a grant with the State Coastal Conservancy, the EPA. It's an EPA grant, and it's with this San Francisco Estuary Project. So it's EBDA and the San Francisco Estuary Project have gotten a grant to study the possibility to advance a living levee concept that was originally tested at the Orloma Wastewater Treatment Plant. And so the looking is, can this be designed and implemented in a natural environment? And what are the constraints and feasibility of doing that? And so they're currently doing a design for that, and the Park District will be evaluating the feasibility of that construction and then how it could best suit our needs in those areas. So, but that project, and then there's another project being considered of the orange section around Orloma Wastewater District, their sewer treatment plant there at the northern edge. And those two projects I mentioned really will also have strong benefits to the city of Hayward, but will also tie into future needs in the city of San Leandro, and also have to be coordinated with Alameda County Flood Control District. So as these projects start to become implemented and we start to expand, we need to really look at HASPA and the structure of HASPA. And so HASPA over this this year is really going to be looking at the structure of the agency and should it be expanded to include other entities, and what are some mechanisms to better coordinate these long-term projects that will be need to coordinate with other entities as they go forward. So those are some of the things we're starting to look at, but we're really looking to start implementing some of these projects and provide resiliency to these areas and protect the marsh habitats. And that's really the purpose of the plan. There's much more to talk about in the plan itself. We have a very informative website and be happy to answer anything else in questions. Trying to keep it brief, but there's just a lot of detail here.
Thanks, Matt. And so in terms of engagement for these two projects, they were similar in some ways, but different in others. So because the Hayward Shoreline Adaptation Master Plan was focused on one site only, we were able to do the engagement earlier on in the process. And because of that, we were able to do some of the engagement in 2019, which meant that we could do in person. So that's the image that you see at the bottom of your screen. Both projects had online community surveys as well as the online public forums and a project webpage. But the difference really was that because Hayward was focused on one site, we were able to do in-person meetings, whereas the RAP was all virtual. Next slide. And so in terms of the next steps, you may be thinking, well, this is great, but where do we go from here? And so the key takeaway here is that coordination between stakeholders, coordination with the public is going to be key. And in order to have maximum flood protection, habitat benefits, and have the best adaptive design planning, and to really position ourselves for funding and permitting, coordination with others is going to be essential. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Great, thanks, Matt and Chantal. So I'm just going to run through just a couple of the other projects that the Plan Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development Department, really the district as a whole, are working on right now. So we do have the Mckay Avenue GSA property. This is the Crown Beach expansion plan. So this was 3 acres that were purchased after a hard-fought battle at Crown Beach, adjacent to Crab Cove. So moving forward with a master plan for that site, and that should be complete in the fall. And I believe we should be coming forward to the PAC soon to get some initial input on that project. Chantal mentioned Alameda Point and the Northwest Territories Regional Shoreline. We continue to develop different concept plans and coordinating with the Veterans Administration and the City of Alameda on that. And really right now the focus is to negotiate a lease on the property. Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline. This is the Tidewater expansion project, which I believe has come before the PAC not too long ago. And we're expected to begin construction on that in the spring. And then Matt had mentioned the Hayward Marsh restoration. So currently developing the concept plans for that, and community engagement, focused community engagement on that marsh restoration will begin in the summer. And then just to mention, there's a lot going on in this space. There's a lot of different regional planning efforts that are going on. We do our best to track them all, and we participate as appropriate. So we are a partner in the Climate Adaptation Network. We do participate in Bay Adapt, which is developing a regional strategy to address sea level rise. We've participated in the CHARGE group, the Climate Hazard Adaptation Resiliency Group, which is really focused of a lot of the flood protection agencies. And then over the years, we've participated in Adapting to Rising Tides, the Resilient by Design program. All of our work utilizes information that's been developed and incorporated into the Adaptation Atlas. And then, of course, we continue to work with the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority as a key funding partner. So with that, part of what we really feel is important is to tell our story. So we often get questions about, what's the Park District doing about climate change, or, what's the Park District doing about sea level rise? And we really see this as just really embedded in the work that we do. Every project that we do is a climate project. So we're going to continue to advance these shoreline projects to adapt to climate adaptation while enhancing public access and restoring shoreline habitats. We really refer to that as sort of maximizing the co-benefits. As Chantal mentioned, just partnerships are going to be important with our agencies in the region on these interjurisdictional projects and around the policy framework and regional adaptation efforts. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I just want to pop up here real quick a story map. A story map is sort of a GIS-based map that we have put together to try to put all of this information into one place to make it accessible to the public. So we'll be putting this out on social media. I'll be sure to share a link with the PAC and the board. And really what this does is just kind of runs through, gives an overview of the park district and our shoreline parks, and kind of goes through, discusses our policy framework. We've developed some videos on our shoreline park, so incorporates that there. And then again, sort of a map-based guide to our existing shoreline parks. Something where the public can quickly view a risk assessment. So a map here where you can kind of, zoom in and say, look at different scenarios of what this would be a six level rise in sea level. So what does that look like compared to a 3-level rise? So this was developed by our GIS team and Meg Peterson in our GIS department specifically. So a lot of really good work that's come out of our GIS group. And then again, highlighting the two big planning efforts that Matt and Chantal just discussed here with links to the master plan site, so people can go and access that information where they need to. And then again, going over each of our shoreline projects in here, as well as discussing our future projects, where we're working around the region, those regional initiatives that I mentioned, and then all of this, the most, probably most important is to continue to support and advocate for the legislation that will actually bring about the funding that's going to be necessary to do this. And it's a lot of funding, and it's a huge lift on the part of the Park District and really all of our partners to really address these challenges. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Chantal and Matt are here as well. And thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Brian, Chantal, and Matt. Before we get to the questions, and I see hands going up already, we have a fourth item on our agenda. Carol has indicated that she's willing to carry that over to another meeting. And I'm going to suggest, unless there's some objection to that, that we do that so that we have time to answer these questions. So with that, I will, well, let me know if you have objection to it. Otherwise, we'll go forward with the questions on this item. And I think the first questioner is Professor Tsutsui.
Thanks, Rick. And thank you for that presentation. That was really interesting and informative. I know here in West County, one of the big concerns along our shoreline in West Contra Costa County is the really badly contaminated soil as a sort of legacy of industrial contamination. And I believe both Chantal and Brian mentioned this in passing in the presentation, but the concern as related to climate change is that these contaminants are likely to be mobilized by water intrusion as sea level rises into these soils and release these contaminants out into the bay and potentially expose people to them as well as the ecosystems. And so I was wondering, so here in West County, there is a controversy about what's the best way to deal with it. And obviously this is potentially an enormously costly problem to deal with. And so I was wondering what the Park District's philosophy is toward dealing with contaminated soils and water intrusion, especially in the places where these contaminants are, really toxic and persistent. Thank you.
Well, I'll say, first and foremost, I think, the Park District's perspective is that, the source of that contamination needs to be responsible for ensuring it's cleaned up or that it's capped and protected in a way that doesn't impact the bay. So which is a challenge for the park district that does, manage or a number of these places, or, is looking at future park projects adjacent to our properties. And Alameda Point's a good example where the Navy continues to evaluate cleanup of that site. And I think we've increasingly recognized, while, they can cap the top of the soils, questions about what happens with groundwater coming up from the bottom is a big question. So I think, first and foremost, we try to protect the park district, we try to protect our parks, and then we really try to advocate for the funding and for those responsible to make sure that there is a fully adaptive plan that not only protects water quality and addresses the contaminants, but also looks towards, it doesn't just fence off an area, but can actually, provide, get to a place that there's potential for public access there. So it's a constant challenge. And Matt, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else there, but it's just, it's a long-term proposition in terms of continuing to address the legacy on the East Bay.
And yeah, thanks, Brian. So Matt Grawl, Chief of Stewardship. I would just add that just for a specific case example, I mean, we did look at those issues in the Hayward Shoreline Master Plan. And one of the areas, I didn't have time to go through and point it out, but there's some old closed landfill in the center of that planning area. And so we did look at the options, and basically the best option is going to be to protect that in place. And so, I mean, the most feasible option. And so since that's already there, the idea was to put other like hard revetments and things to make sure that's stable, and then so it doesn't erode into the future. But that's, I mean, one case. In other areas, well, we really need to take a specific look at it and look at, can we relocate those things, or what's the most feasible option, or can we just add more cap or add more shoreline protection to continue protecting in the future? But I think the site-specific concerns are going to really drive these. I think ideally we'd try to get those things off the shoreline of the bay, but I think in many ways, some of these, the way these things have happened, it's going to be pretty much infeasible to do that in a lot of cases. So.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Rick, I think you're muted here.
Sorry about that. I see Michael Gregory, and after him, Deb and Susie. And Linda, are you trying to raise your hand as well? Okay, I'll get to you. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. Great presentation. I'll be brief. Kudos on the investment of GIS. Brian, I'm fascinated with it and how it applies to managing and tackling wickedly complex problems, and then being able to translate it to the public. It's genius. Right when I had my brain wrapped around horizontal levees, I happened to see that ecotone levee designation at Alameda Point. Can someone describe what the heck that is?
It's a variation of a horizontal levee that allows some level of wastewater or stormwater to come through it and then feed the vegetation to create more of a transitional habitat. In this case, it would allow more trees and other things to grow to create a transition from the marsh into the upland. So that is the idea of an ecotone levee, to be a vegetated slope similar to a horizontal levee.
Great, thanks so much.
Dev.
Mine's a very basic question. What is GIS?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question, and we get so used to just throwing that word around, and we assume everybody knows what it is. But I recognize not everybody does. GIS it stands for Geographic Information Systems, and that's just basically digital mapping. So your Google Earth and any of those sort of digital mapping types of things that we do, and we're blessed at the Park District with a really talented staff on that front.
Thank you. And a great presentation. Thank you.
Susie and then Linda.
Hi, thank you. Yes, a great presentation. And one of the first questions I'd had for Rick when he was giving me a little orientation to coming on board as a new member of the PAC. Does the Park District have any position on this newly planned luxury housing development on the shoreline in Newark? Is there anything?
In Newark, this is the Area 3, Area 4 we've been monitoring that over the year. The Park District hasn't taken a position on that. I think we share in a lot of the concerns around addressing sea level rise and everything else, but it's a little bit separate from any of our facilities and not directly adjacent to our parklands. So we haven't engaged as directly in that project.
Okay, thank you.
Linda D., you have a question.
I do. I have a comment and a question. So much thanks to Brian, Chantal, and Matt. This is really, forward thinking, and there are so many regional agencies working on this and adaptation, resiliency. And it's interesting because I was going to ask the same question that Neil asked, and I just can't help but put in 2 cents as a former Superfund site project manager from the US EPA after 21 years. I'm always asking questions when we go out on these tours and we're accepting new land and what that means. And I am sure that Sabrina and staff and lawyers are going to be really clear. But I just can't help but note that I have had experience where the current landowner, even though they weren't responsible for the legacy because they had done some work or some management on that land, was later named as a responsible party. So anyway, I just hope we continue to, that always kind of, Neil, I'm with you with that concern with uprising and stuff. And, we want to reuse these lands, and EPA really pushes and brownfields really pushes for the reuse of them. But, we're in for a mess on some of them. But my other question was that, I've been looking at East Bay Mud site, East Bay Regional Park District's, our site recently. I did look at East Bay Mud also, which is what got me thinking. As Sabrina noted, the desire to lead the nation, I think, is something that we're already doing as a local government. But I'm just curious, besides all this really intense work and in the weeds that you're doing, I couldn't find that. Do we have an overall climate action plan or climate action resiliency plan for the agency? That's my question. I do think that we're leading the way with what you guys are doing with the shoreline adaptation. And then the second question have staff or directors considering doing a declaration of emergency? I work with a lot of local cities who are doing that right now. So that's kind of my one comment about legacy chemicals, and the 2 questions are, do we have an overall climate action plan, and have staff considered passing a declaration of emergency, a climate emergency resolution?
Well, I'll answer the question about the climate action plan. We did review and go through an effort to try to identify and address the park district's climate emissions as it relates to our buildings and our facilities. And we started discussing developing a climate action plan. And that is where we started to recognize that, a lot of the park district's emissions from our operations are essentially zeroed out through our solar projects at Shadow Cliffs and others. And there was only, there's so much that we could do in terms of reducing that. So then it was really looking at, okay, how do we, sort of an adaptation strategy? How do we address the impacts of climate change on the park district? And I think that's where I say, a lot of that is embedded in each of our projects. So I guess I would say our master plan is our climate adaptation plan. It's within our master plan. It's part of our projects, and it's something that we continue to move forward on. So regarding the emergency declaration, I don't know if that's been considered. The board did adopt its climate policy framework, which, really says that we will consider climate change and in all of the park district's actions, and so that's on the forefront of each of our projects. But as far as an emergency declaration, I'm not sure if that's been considered, and I'm not as familiar with those.
Okay. Thank you. Elisa.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It's always good to learn more about what we're doing along our coast, our shoreline. I wanted to ask about the living levees. And so I see that there's one in each of the areas that you highlighted for your projects. Is this kind of like the wave of the future? Is that where we're going as far as adapting for climate change around the Bay? Do you think?
Well, it's only going to work in certain scenarios. And so I think that's where we've got to really, that's part of what we're doing now. And luckily the Estuary Project and EBDA partnered to get that grant to study that area. So we're going to see how feasible it can be. You know, in that location, there is some space to work with, but the challenge is we're constrained by railroad tracks and the existing marsh. And so there's going to have to be some adjustments to the existing marsh to make that function there. So we'll see if that works. In other areas, you just don't have enough shoreline to work with, and it's too narrow. And so there'll have to be other solutions that can be used there. But when you have a lot of space to work with, and it can be a good tool, a good option. And so I think that's what really, I mean, they're considering in other areas of the Bay. So we'll get a better idea of where this can work after a few of these projects. But I think we are certainly one of the first looking at designing it. But I don't know it's been considered at other locations. So I think after a few of these projects get engineered more and designed, we can better understand exactly where it could work.
Yeah, that was kind of.
I mean, I think it could work in a lot of locations if you relocate and move infrastructure inland and then use that. But I think right now that we're not having as much of that conversation around residential and also industrial infrastructure about retreating. And once we retreat from those areas, we'd have more opportunities to do living levees. But right now, when you have things right up against the bay, we have limited opportunity.
That's going to kind of be my next question is the fills. I know that filling to create these living levees is a huge issue, especially when it comes to permitting. So I was going to ask how you were going to get around that. But since you're the first, you
right. Well, I mean, but I think that's part of the process now is to go into it and try to better understand that. And we're going to be working with the Bay Restoration integration team. It's often called the BRIT. It was established recently. That's going to be a partnership of all the regulatory agencies permitting these projects at once. And so we're planning to go through the design process with them and better understand those trade-offs and how we can accommodate those potential trade-offs in a design and implementation of a project like this. But that is the big challenge. And I mean, the agencies, BCDC and the Water Board, the Army Corps are starting to look at that. And, how can fill be allowed where it's beneficial and being done to protect habitat or to create habitat? And then what are the trade-offs and where would that apply? Because they certainly want to be very careful when they change their regulations that beneficial fill doesn't get misused to allow industrial or development right in the shoreline areas. So
thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. I'm sure we'll hear more in the future from you. I think the only other item we have on this item on the agenda is a public comment from Kelly.
Yes, thank you very much. I recently, a couple of days ago, published a piece on sea level rise and development all around the Tri-City Ecology newsletter. I didn't publish it, I wrote it. Around the margins of San Francisco Bay, old levees or surrounding old salt ponds and potamasters were never designed to provide serious flood protection. Levees need substantial upgrades to protect sewer and water treatment plants, industrial parks and housing subdivisions. Planners are coming to grips with the sea level rise, but not the housing developers, not the land use laws, and not the courts. Last month, Hayward approved the Shoreline Plan co-authored by the Park District, but cities still allow development in wetlands. In late 2020, a court allowed 500 housing units in the Newark wetlands of Area 4. The court took a broader view of sea level rise. It said development would not impact the environment because sea level rise is an impact of the environment on a project, not an issue of the project's impact on the environment. The court issued a clarion warning. This court ruling puts the onus squarely on cities, property owners, and developers who stand in the path of rising waters. Environmental groups have traditionally perceived sea level rise in narrower terms as a harmful transmutation of the ecosystem. Future generations of property owners are going to need stricter liability protection to recover flood damages from cities, developers, and lenders. As Wangari Maathai said, quote, "The environment and the economy are really two sides of the same coin. If we can't sustain the environment, we cannot sustain ourselves," end quote. Stricter liability could protect homeowners. Cities may ultimately adopt hard-nosed policies like managed retreat that transform low-lying areas into wetlands involuntarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, we will move on quickly to PAC member comments if anyone wishes to make a comment at this point. Andrew.
Okay, here we go. Got one comment and one sort of pleased announcement. I want to thank Park for doing something. District. I have a question about volunteers and COVID. I was told that the Park District is not yet finalized rules or guidelines for volunteers and the COVID. If that's not true, I'd like to be corrected. That's one. The second is I'd like to commend the park's handling of the bald eagles nesting in Ardenwood. These are urban bald eagles. They live within 200 feet of a busy street. They've successfully produced young, and Park District has successfully managed that very well. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know if there's anyone on staff who can respond. Oh, Chief Chaburro.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
My apologies. You may have some background noise. My system failed. So good afternoon, Chief Chaburro, Anthony Chaburro, your Assistant General Manager of Public Safety and your Chief of Police. Thanks for having me tonight. So I can speak regarding the volunteers under the purview of public safety, and that would be the Volunteer Trail Safety Patrol, and we are activating them as of April 1st. And that really was a joint effort with Carol Victor from District Council, of course, my staff, Captain Breathe and Heather Gilfillan, that is their chain of command. Of course, Captain Love helped with that as well. So we are activating our volunteers. We are working on a plan to have them come in, kind of a no-touch type of drive-through plan to make sure they have all the equipment they need and all the guidance that they need. So again, that would be for the Volunteer Trail Safety Patrol. There are other volunteers in the district who work for other divisions. So we felt, though, at this point, it was prudent to bring back. It was a good idea, and we felt it was safe to bring back the VTSP.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from PAC members? The only thing I was going to mention in my report from the chair was to make sure to see the open roads segment if you haven't. So I'll emphasize that again. That's a worthwhile thing to do. Yay. Anyone who attended board committees? Susie.
Oh, just remind them that to look for the Sharon's email. There is a link if they missed that open roads.
Great. Yeah, it probably is also on the Channel 11 website, but I haven't looked. Any reports from board committee meetings to share? Any other old business or new business? Neil, is that? Oh, you're just waving your hand at me. Okay. If not, then the Park Advisory Committee meeting of March 22nd is now adjourned at 6:15 p.m. And the next meeting is scheduled for April 26th. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you.